L'ordine del giorno reca la dichiarazione del Consiglio e della Commissione sulla preparazione delle riunioni del Consiglio europeo del 21 e del 22 e il recesso del Regno Unito dall'Unione Europea. Ha la parola a nome del Consiglio.
The first speaker, Gabriela Schott, for the Council.
Honourable members, Vice President, Chief Negotiator, the European Council will hold important discussions on a number of strategic challenges and opportunities facing the Union. Let me start with the economy. Leaders will discuss the current economic situation and will set priorities for the 2019 European semester. The European Council will also endorse the euro area recommendation. Europe, as the rest of the world, faces the systemic changes brought about by such issues as the digital transformation, the rise of the data economy, or indeed the transition to a greener economy. Harnessing these opportunities will be key to our future prosperity. To strengthen our economic base, we need to make sure that our different policies, whether digital, industrial, single market or trade policies, are mobilised in unison to meet these challenges and advance the strategic interests of the Union. The European Council will hold a cross-cutting and forward-looking discussion on the issue. Another critical issue is climate change, which we have just discussed in this session. As was noted in this debate, we as a Union need to help raise global ambition and continue to lead the way on climate action. This means implementing the current 2030 framework, but also engaging in the long-term transition to a climate-friendly future. We know that we need to provide the right incentive for this transformation, and we will have to make sure that we leave no one behind, taking into account regional specificities and different socio-economic circumstances. The European Council will discuss the issue and provide guidance for further work in the Council. China is a key global player in all these issues. Leaders will have an in-depth exchange of views on our relations with China in preparation for the upcoming EU-China summit. Finally, a cornerstone of our democracies is that citizens should be able to vote in a well-informed and safe manner. Ahead of the European elections, the Presidency will report on the latest developments to protect the democratic process from manipulation and interference from inside and outside the EU. Leaders will also be informed of ongoing efforts to tackle disinformation more broadly, following the joint action plan presented last December by the Commission and the High Representative. Next week, the European Council will, of course, also meet in its Article 50 format to discuss the latest developments regarding Brexit. President, honourable members, to be or not to be a member of the European Union, to exist or not to exist, this is the question that the British Parliament should address as we speak. Unfortunately, we are not dealing with theatre, but with the real lives and jobs of EU and UK citizens. At this very late stage, we are still determined to facilitate the conclusions of the withdrawal agreement provisionally agreed last year. However, this should not be the detriment of the solidarity among Member States, especially as regards Ireland. To be frank, given the additional assurances we provided in December, January and on Monday, it is difficult to see what more we can do. Within the limits of our principles and positions, notably as regards citizens' rights and the Irish backstop, we nevertheless remain open to talks and clarifications if this can help the ratification process in the UK. These clarifications should not, however, contradict the very intention of the backstop, but only confirm that indeed it is intended to be a temporary nature. On the EU side, we are as advanced as possible regarding the conclusion of the withdrawal agreement, on which I understand the consent of the EP could be given in a matter of days, should all the clarity needed on the UK side be provided. It is, however, very likely that even if the British Parliament were to vote in favour of the withdrawal agreement in the coming days, this would have to be accompanied by a request for a technical time-limited extension. This would mean amending the agreement, and possible delaying the consent process at this extension would have to be agreed by the coming European Council. When considering such a request, we would expect a credible justification for a possible extension and its duration. However, I am confident that our institutions will be able to complete this process in a good time and, consequently, ensure a timely entry into force of the agreement. As I said before, we remain open for talks as long as there is an end in sight and a purpose in these talks, which means that the UK government and the British Parliament have to come out with a clear sense of direction as to where there is a majority and timing as to when it will materialise. In the meantime, the only certainty we have is an increased uncertainty for citizens and for businesses, with an already clear economic impact in terms of level of activity, investment and, more importantly, jobs. It is therefore all the more necessary to continue our preparations for all outcomes, including a no-deal scenario. In this context, the Council and the Member States at national level are intensifying their work on preparedness and contingency, building on the solid work already underway. I am very much encouraged by the large number of contingency and preparedness-related measures that our institutions have been able to agree on in spite of the heavy workload at this late stage of the legislature. The Presidency is confident that, with your cooperation, it will be possible to complete the adoption of the remaining contingency measures in due course, but hoping at the same time that they won't be needed. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Schott. And now the first President of the Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Timmermans. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So here we are. After another vote in the House of Commons, the withdrawal agreement has been voted down. Regardless of the extra clarifications being given, regardless of the tremendous effort by Michel Barnier and Jean-Claude Juncker to help Theresa May clarify the issues, still the withdrawal agreement was voted down. So again, today, we will be waiting for the next vote in the House of Commons, because the only ones who can give us any direction of where we need to go from now are the members of Parliament in the United Kingdom, in the House of Commons. And I believe this House and the European Commission remain on the same line, to do as little harm as possible to Europeans, whether they live in the United Kingdom or on the continent. This is our duty, to think about our citizens, to think about our enterprises, to think about our interests broadly on both sides of the Channel. And I say this because what we've tried to do, mainly Michel has tried to do, is to make sure that the red lines put on the table by the British government and the need for us to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland and to maintain the integrity of the internal market are brought together. And I don't see any better solution than the withdrawal agreement with all the clarifications given. So now, this is where we are. Of course, we will remain in this position to want to do as little harm as possible in a very harmful process, because Brexit is very harmful to the United Kingdom and to the European Union. But it is our duty, on the basis of a vote of the British people, to work towards a Brexit that does as little harm as possible. This position will not change. But today we are in the hands of the British political system. They should tell us where they want to go from now. The solution will have to come from London, and we'll take it from there. And of course, there are many other issues Europe has to deal with in the next couple of years, and that's why the European Council also focuses on other issues. Industrial policy. Our industry is strong, and it's the engine of our economy. It employs 32 million people and directly accounts for more than 2/3 of our exports. It is one of the main reasons we have partners lining up at our door to secure free and fair trade agreements. But we must do more. We want to see strong European companies bolstered by fair competition at home, leading in the world and addressing major challenges such as climate change. In particular, we urge Member States to make the most of major common European projects that matter to all of us, for instance in strategic areas such as next generation batteries to store clean energy or the work on artificial intelligence. Most importantly, we want to make sure that as industry and technologies develop, we continue to defend our values. Because ultimately, we do all of this in the interest and the well-being of all Europeans. That's why we propose work-life balance, equal pay for equal work in the same place, and the European Labour Authority, to name but a few. It is all part and parcel of our consistent efforts to make our single market of 500 million informed consumers and thriving businesses deeper and fairer. And it's high time to deliver on all its dimensions, particularly in services, digital, energy and also, importantly, the Capital Markets Union.
This European Council is also an opportunity to speak about our relations with China a few days away from the summit with them. In a number of different political fields, is a cooperation partner, a negotiation partner, an economic rival, and also a system rival, putting forward different forms of governance. And a number of times they have said that they do want to contribute to a future that will be one of more open globalization, more inclusive globalization. For its part, the European Union is one of the most open economies in the world. But we strongly defend multilateralism on the basis of values for all and of rules that do need to be fair for all as well, without being a naive adherent to free trade. But that is why we have suggested putting in place an international instrument on public markets for procurement to have access to that around the world, and to ensure that between the European Union and China there is more confidence, more cooperation, more reciprocity, so that our investors and our companies benefit in China from the same open conditions as those which are opened to Chinese investors here in Europe. Unfortunately, today that is not the case. And it goes without saying that we do have the duty to defend our values, our strategic interests, to protect our industries, our workers and our citizens against any unfair competition. And that is why we have established a new framework to filter foreign investment so that we can preserve our strategic interests here in Europe. And I would like to congratulate the European Parliament for its excellent work and in adopting this initiative in record time. And it is clear also that it is in our interest not only to improve the multilateral system that already agrees in particular on aid and state subsidies. China also has to shoulder its responsibilities in that field.
Real sovereignty can be demonstrated by the European Union in the climate change debate as well. We can have a big zero emissions economy. Taking those targets on board means looking at the multi-annual financial framework and devoting a large part of that to combating climate change. We have got to invest in renewable energies and not take away anyone's livelihood. It's possible to reduce emissions and at the same time to be innovative and create high-value jobs. I'd like to thank this House for its support for sustainable investment, which we are proud of, those proposals. We are giving the lead worldwide when it comes to encouraging and redirecting private investment to achieve the Paris Accord objectives for a climate neutral environmental fund. Young people are taking to the streets. They want a higher level of ambition. And this is really where Europe can step in, one which can inspire people with courage for the future. I'd like to thank Greta Thunberg and all the others for that inspiration which they have given us.
Mut brauchen wir auch.
This is one of the biggest challenges for our democracies. There are conscious attempts to manipulate our debate and the public discourse. Our message is that Europe remains open for business. Diversity of opinion is our greatest good, but we are not naive. We are conscious that there are forces which threaten and disrupt our democracies. And on the election campaign, that's going to be a major challenge, and we will have to be very vigilant. Therefore, I welcome the fact that the European Parliament and the Member States are supporting the Commission's measures to fight against disinformation and meddling in our election processes. However, this is just the beginning and much remains to be done. Because we have sovereignty in the Union, but only if we are ruthless in defending our prerogatives, both inside and outside of this Union of ours. Thank you, President.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier Vice-Président de la Commission européenne. Maintenant, je donne tout de suite la parole.
Thank you very much to the Vice President, first Vice President of the European Commission. I give the floor now to the Chief Brexit Negotiator, Mr. Barnier.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. And good morning to everybody. This is a special morning and a serious one too. Part of the very long negotiation process. My first words, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, are to say to you that on behalf of the team that I have the honour to lead with the trust of President Juncker, I would like to say that my thanks are very sincere and lasting for all the confidence that the Parliament has placed in me. I was saying earlier, the confidence of presidents, that this is not something that falls from heaven. It isn't invented, nor is it simply given as a blank check. It is a trust that is based on dialogue, on transparency. And from the very first day, this has been the case, and the trust will remain based on dialogue and on transparency. Yesterday evening's vote that Vice President Timmermans mentioned, and you did too, Minister, just prolongs and makes worse deep uncertainty that was created almost 3 years ago now by the sovereign decision of the UK that we do respect, even though we regret it. That was an uncertainty that, of course, affects the United Kingdom, in particular Northern Ireland, but that also affects us and all of our countries. Ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you that the responsibility for the Brexit decision belongs solely to the United Kingdom. And today, our first responsibility to find a way out of the impasse that the negotiations are in, that responsibility lies fair and square with the United Kingdom, and that is what was said loud and strong by the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, yesterday after the vote. We have tried to find solutions together, solutions to each problem, and there are countless problems. Human ones, social ones. There are legal and technical problems. There are economic and financial problems created by Brexit. And to try to manage all of these different consequences in order to stay side by side with the United Kingdom in an ordered exit from the European Union. That's been our aim from the word go and is still our aim, and the objective of the EU has always been to reduce the level of uncertainty by ensuring that there is an ordered exit, and then thanks to that ordered and orderly exit, and thanks to the trust that we will build because of that orderly exit, that the time we will have to take to do what we need to. So that time will be between 21 months and 4 years for another negotiation. And I've always said that this is the most important one, besides Brexit and the exit. That is the most important one because it's about the future relations that we want to build with the UK, which, whatever the circumstances, will remain a country that is our friend, a country that is an ally, and a country that is a partner. So that is what we have done in our negotiations over several months with the government of the United Kingdom, with them and never against the government of the United Kingdom. A withdrawal agreement which is in the interest of citizens, of business and of all stakeholders on both sides of the Channel and on both sides of the Irish Sea. Let me just remind you of one point, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to remind you all of this. If the United Kingdom still wants to leave the European Union and want to do so in an orderly fashion, if that is still the intention of the United Kingdom, then this treaty, which we negotiated with the government of Theresa May for a year and a half, this treaty is and will remain the only available treaty. And I want everybody to understand that fully. And we, alongside this treaty, have done an awful lot of work with the UK government over the past few days to explain, to clarify, to guarantee things through documents that we have agreed on, that we agreed on here in the very Parliament on Monday evening, welcomed here as we were by Strasbourg. And Mrs. May said to us that she also wanted to publish a unilateral declaration. So what did happen Monday in that last round of discussions between the EU and the UK government? That was to provide the House of Commons and the UK Parliament with new assurances, new explanations, such as the temporary nature of the backstop. We went as far as we possibly could in order to help the UK government get the support of the House of Commons, with one concern always in the back of our minds that I expressed in your name also, is that we have to always maintain peace and stability on the island of Ireland. And we do have to respect in the Good Friday Agreement, in every aspect of that agreement, the Belfast Agreement as it's also known. And also for us, the importance of maintaining, of keeping the integrity of our internal market, which is the internal market of our 28 countries at the moment, soon to be 27. That is to preserve the quality and the safety that consumers are owed for the goods that they consume. We have to have food security. We have to preserve against any animal feed problems. We have to look at customs rights, VAT, and we have to have protection and clarity and security for all businesses in all your countries. We have to ensure that we have got standards for all our goods. And I just want to say to you that in Ireland and with Ireland, it's not a question of theory or of dogma whether or not we will show flexibility. It is a very practical issue indeed that deals with peace in Ireland. That peace must be lasting, and it also deals with the protection of the single market. All goods, any living animal that goes into Northern Ireland after Brexit that comes from Great Britain could then go to Poland, to Slovenia, to Belgium, to Germany, to any one of our countries, because it is the single market and there will not be a border. So we do have to find a way, and that is what we will take the time to do, to ensure that these controls on the three aspects that I mentioned, that is consumers, the budget and businesses, that they are in place. And we do not want to recreate a hard border. So on yesterday's vote then, well, I see that there are some members of the House of Commons that want a second referendum, others want no deal, and these just run counter to all the legal assurances that we found in our discussions with Theresa May. But I think that these explanations and the guarantees are indeed significant, and we agreed them on Monday evening with the support of the UK government. President Juncker also said that there will be no further interpretations, no further assurances. We cannot go any further. So, to conclude, a word about what will be happening now. Where are we this morning, then? The Prime Minister announced a vote on no deal this evening and on the possible extension. These will take place in the House of Commons. After those votes, it will be up to the UK government to tell us what and how they intend to proceed, and we hope in a positive way so that they can eventually have a constructive majority on a proposal. And it is the responsibility of the United Kingdom. They have to tell us what it is they want for our future relations. What will their choice be? As you said, Madam Minister, what will be the clear line that they take? That is the question that we need an answer to now. That is the question that has to be answered before a decision really on a possible further extension. Why would we extend these discussions? Because the discussion on Article 50, that is done and dusted. We have the withdrawal agreement. It is there. And so that is the question asked, and we are waiting for the answer to that. So we are at a critical point. The risk of no deal has never been higher. That is the risk of an exit, even by accident, by the UK of the European Union in a disorderly fashion. And I urge you, please, not to underestimate that risk or its consequences. And in all seriousness, we now call on all those players involved, the European Union. Mr. Juncker has mentioned that, all member states as well, thanks to the work to all presidencies, and yours in particular, Madam President. We are ready for this. We are preparing for this. It is not a scenario that we want. We have never worked for this particular option. We don't want a no deal, an absence of an agreement. We've never wanted that. We have always worked towards finding an agreement and an orderly exit. But we are ready. The EU is ready to face that situation if we have to. And I would just remind you that if there is no other agreement, if we cannot reach another agreement, simply the way the treaty works is that risk of no deal is what we are facing.
Sometimes, even this morning, are you disappointed after this vote? My answer, our answer, shall always remain the same. We remain respectful of the UK and its people. We remain determined, calm and united, and we will remain respectful, calm, determined and united until the end of this extraordinary negotiation. We shall defend the Union interests and that all of its citizens. That will remain the line of your negotiator. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Michel. Tu es aussi le négociateur du Parlement européen.
Thank you very much, Michel. You are also the negotiator for the European Parliament, so we would like to thank you, and we would like to thank all the working groups in the European Parliament, coordinated by Guy Verhofstadt, and everybody for all the work that they have been doing to try to solve an exceedingly complicated and very serious and important issue for all of us. Now we will hear from the groups, and first of all from Manfred Weber, Group of the EPP. The floor is yours, sir.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President Michel, Council Representative, dear colleagues, what a disaster after yesterday's vote. I want to speak about one impression I got when I was in Portugal, in Porto. I met there young people, I discussed with them. They were for a few years working in London, in Great Britain, after the political problems and the economic problems in Portugal. They left the country and they worked there. And they came back now to Portugal because they have so much uncertainty in Great Britain. They enjoy life again in their home country. And they spoke about their friends from Great Britain. They told me how frustrated the young generation is in Great Britain, how helpless they feel, how angry they are about the failure of the whole political class in Great Britain. A whole generation will suffer under what is happening today in London. A whole generation has less chances than the future generation for the future. A whole generation will not enjoy the same benefits like the previous generation had, and a whole generation is victim of the political failure of a political class in London. And that's why my main message, first of all, is that we as Europeans, we are on their side of the young generation in Great Britain. We don't let you alone in this difficult situation of time. The first message is this. The second is what is now to do. There is for sure the preparation needed for the worst case scenario. We cannot rescue Great Britain. It's up to them to decide what they want to do. So we have to prepare for the worst case scenario. The second thing is that when the political class fails, when there is no majority possible in the parliament, the logical next step is to ask again the people. That is, from a democratic point of view, the logical next step. And the third option is on the table, is a debate about the prolongation. But for what? We need reasonable arguments for any kind of prolongation. And that's why, let me be clear, from my point of view, from an EPP point of view, there is no need and no option for any single day of prolongation if we get no clarification from the British side what they want to achieve in this period of time. There are the three options on the table. I want to add a third important element. First, the young generation. Second, what to do. And the third element is a kind of a firewall. We as Europeans, we are for the moment very stable. Thanks to the work of our representatives, Jean-Claude Juncker, Michel Barnier. In the House, it's President Tajani and Guy Verhofstadt. So we are stable, we are strong, we are united. We have a clear opinion what we want to achieve, what we want to do. But there is a risk in the next upcoming weeks that the political uncertainty in London is also infecting the European decision-making process. That there is a risk on this. And we have two aspects in mind. One aspect is that again and again and again we are discussing in the European Council mainly about Brexit and not about China, not about the trade to Trump, not about the real issues which are important for the citizens of this European Union. And that's why we cannot continue like this, to have occupied space, political space, only due to the political uncertainty in London. And the second thing is that the European elections are ahead of us. We are all preparing the campaign. We are already in the campaign, a few of us, and that is what we have to clarify. That the European elections is a place, is a moment where the Europeans will decide about their future. And this cannot be occupied by legal and political uncertainty with the Brexit situation. And that's why I think we are running out of time. That's why the Brits must really clarify until hopefully next Council meeting what they want to achieve, what they want to have in the future. Those who believe in the project of the European Union, for those in the European Union, this development is for sure an important wake-up call. We see the economic and political uncertainty in London, and those who don't want to follow this have to fight now against the populists and the extremists on this continent. Brexit was made by populism, by easy answers, and they cannot give us any kind of answer how they want to deal with this Brexit outcome. And that's why I think for the European elections we have to form now a strong coalition, a confirmation of partnership in Europe to have confirmation about the common base on the future of this continent, a confirmation that we believe in the European project. Thank you so much.
La parola al Presidente del Gruppo.
I now call the President of the Socialist Group, Udo Bullmann. President, distinguished colleagues, the Spring Summit traditionally is a time in which we decide on the economic situation in the European Union. Now, earlier this morning we talked about climate change. And I would like to appeal to both the Commission as well as the Council. We have no time left. Let's transform the Spring Summit into a sustainability summit, because Frans Timmermans is quite right to say that we can't wait when it comes to tackling climate change. We have got to overhaul our instruments, and we have got to transform the Stability and Growth Pact into a Sustainability Pact. And we have got to make sure that our semester is made up of sustainability instruments. That has to be the response to the current state of affairs at this Spring Summit. And all of those who have any influence, please use it to make sure that this paradigm change that we so badly need at long last comes to pass. Now, Antonio Guterres spoke about this 20 years ago, and he is now, of course, in charge at the UN, but it was under the Portuguese presidency that it talked about economy, the ecology, economic competitiveness and sustainability coming together. And we've wasted 2 decades, so we've got now to speed up and to catch up, and it's important that we recast European Union policy. So if, Manfred Weber, it is true that young people from London have now returned to Portugal, then that, of course, has to do something with development in the country. Now, Antonio Costa, who is currently in charge of the Portuguese government, has now had policies of social cohesion and environmental policy and economic growth renewed the country, so they're not mutually contradictory. And there was a time not so long ago that there were people here who wanted harsh economic sanctions against Portugal. So, let's be honest about the fact that our economy needs space to breathe. It needs a new lease of life, and we need to then not talk about Brexit and other challenges. I mean, that is the response to Brexit. I mean, regardless of what actually happens, I mean, there are all kinds of technical details, but the real European answer to Brexit is to be courageous, be bold, and do something that is not counter to the interests of ordinary people, and that is the message of our group. Now, Brexit, of course, is at a critical juncture. We know that, and all we can do is call on the House of Commons to take a sensible decision, one which would counter a hard Brexit, because that would be against the interests of the people of the United Kingdom. And we can only hope that the House of Commons joins across the political groups to move towards a solution whereby the country remains close to the European Union. But if that does not happen, if the House of Commons remains deadlocked, then it will owe a debt to the people of the United Kingdom. So, Theresa May, if you're taking back control, then the people ultimately are going to have to decide, because if the House of Commons fail to agree, then they have to allow the people their say to decide once again, because it is their future that is at stake and not the future of the parliamentarians, of the members of the House of Commons. So that is what needs to be on the agenda for this summit. Now, there are 2 important issues issues, of course, we need to also make sure that our European elections are free and fair, and I would call on all those involved to do more. We've fallen far short so far. We've got to tackle the tech giants, internet companies, and we need to get all of this back on the agenda, because it really is scandalous that we have not reacted and that we have not tackled migration. People are continuing to die in the Mediterranean without our doing anything, without anybody taking European Parliament resolutions seriously. This needs to get back on the agenda. Thank you very much. Now for the Conservative Reformist Group, I call Mr. Henkel.
Mr. Timmermans, you did say that there is no better solution. Monsieur Barnier, vous avez dit il n'y a aucun traité disponible.
You said there's no other treaty than this particular withdrawal treaty.
True. I think there's a better solution. And the better solution is to keep Britain in the European Union. And let me please tell you how you can help do this. First of all, let's stop bashing London. Let's stop bashing London. There are experts in this House who continuously bash London. Here's one, Mr. Farage. There's one, Mr. Verhofstadt. There's no difference in their approach, in their criticism to London. Secondly, I think it is time that the Commission finally admits that they have some responsibility for Brexit. Britain was always in favour of subsidiarity, of decentralisation, of competitiveness, and Brussels has continuously violated these principles. So it is like a country joining a football club and you decided to play golf or hockey. So finally, who has left really whom? Thirdly, I think from a business perspective, we have to recognise that Brexit is not only a disaster for Britain, it is also a disaster for the European Union. Let's face it, Britain is today the largest single customer of the European Union. And Britain leaving is the equivalent of 19 countries, smaller and medium-sized countries, leaving at the same time. So let's also recognise that Britain has been in this House always the advocate for freedom, for self-responsibility, for competitiveness. And without Britain in the European Union, I tell you, this European Union will remain uncompetitive as compared to other regions like North America, Asia, China, Japan, Southeast Asia, and so on. So I think the Commission now has a historical chance to do something. Help the Remainers in Britain to go for a second referendum. And help the Brexiteers to change their mind so they can save their face. And I ask you not only to support, but offer an extension to Britain without any conditions, number one. Number two, offer them some more autonomy over controlling their own immigration. And that will be the trick to get Britain to successfully organise a second referendum and Britain to stay in the European Union. The European Union will never be complete without Britain.
La parola ora al Presidente del Gruppo Liberale, Guy Verhofstadt.
Mr. Verhofstadt.
First of all, I have to tell to Mr. Henkel that personally I have always said that the exit of Britain from the European Union is a failure of the European Union. When a big country like the UK leaves the European Union, it's very difficult to say, oh, what a fantastic thing. It's the opposite. I think that the place of the UK is inside the European Union. And I'm also pretty sure that there will be a generation in the coming years, in the coming decades, who will return to the European Union. I'm sure of it, that this young generation already exists in the UK and that they will take another decision than the decision that has been taken by this government and this majority. But, Mr. Henkel, may I ask you to tell this to your own friends in your own group in the ECR,
who are the main people for a Brexit for the moment. It's a little bit easy to give lessons to us here, and especially to me, and saying, yeah, you don't like Britain, the opposite is true, but not to be capable to convince your own people in your own group, and who are not there for the moment to applaud you, I see. Nobody is there. Secondly, the reality, Mr. Henkel, is the following. Those who started this whole Brexit, who is in fact an attempt of the Conservative Party, you're working with the Conservative Party, you know them very well. It was in fact an attempt to take back control, and that was the big slogan of the Brexiteers, and is still the big slogan of the Brexiteers. It seems to me that Britain seems to be spinning out of control instead of being back in control. And I think that the only reasonable way, Mr. Henkel, to solve this problem, and you didn't talk about that, unfortunately, is that there is cross-party cooperation in British politics the fastest as possible, a compromise, a common view between Labour and the Conservatives. How you want to solve an existential problem like Brexit if it is used by both parties to kill each other? For them, Brexit is a bullet in a weapon, and not an existential problem of a country and of a whole continent. And that's a shame. So our and your appeal have to be in this plenary, not to attack one or other colleague, but to say to the British political class, start to make an agreement between the two big parties, and start, in fact, to have an opinion that we can support here in this Parliament, and that opinion will be a close relationship between the UK and the EU. And that is the way forward. And I think that what is needed is that in British politics, Queen and country are put first, instead of the party politics that are governing the UK politics and the House of Commons for the moment. And that brings me to the next question, extension. I don't want a long extension, I'd say you that very openly. An extension why we go beyond the European elections, and the European elections will be hijacked by the Brexiteers and by the whole Brexit issue. We will talk only about that and not about the real problems and the real reforms that we need in the European Union. And the only thing what we will do, we will give a new mandate to Mr. Farage. That's the only thing what we're going to do. That's exactly what he wants. Why he wants that? For two reasons. First of all, he can continue to have a salary that he can transfer to his offshore company. And the second thing is that he can continue to do his work, dirty work in the European Union, that is to try to destroy the European Union from within. That is the real purpose. Well, that is what you are, and he confirms. So what I think is that that's absolutely what we don't need. What we need is now certainty from the House of Commons, from a majority in the House of Commons, as Mr. Henkel has also asked for. That is what we need. And so I'm against every extension. When an extension of 1 day, 1 week, even 24 hours, if it is not based on a clear opinion of the House of Commons for something, that we know what they want. Is it less ambitious than the deal? Okay, it is less ambitious than the deal. That's your opinion. If it is a customs union, it is a customs union. If it is the deal, it is the deal. If it is a Norway plus, it's a Norway plus. But please make up your mind in London, because this
development, and those must be the issues that we get to grips with, because that is the only way that the EU will be in a position, both within the Union as well as outside, to really genuinely achieve progress, to influence things, and to make sure that we have a sustainable basis for citizens throughout the world. That is our responsibility as a European Union. But yet again, for the second time, the withdrawal agreement has failed in the UK Parliament, and the strategy being pursued by Theresa May and her government has run into the sand, and we don't have a plan now for an orderly withdrawal from the European Union. I mean, that's the upshot to all of this. We don't have a way forward for an orderly exit. So we have people in the UK and the EU, as well as EU citizens in the UK, and Irish citizens in the Republic of Ireland, as well as in the Northern Ireland, whose interests we must represent, because most of them, after all, do not have an opportunity to, quickly shift their headquarters from Belfast to London or vice versa, thinking perhaps that Belfast might remain in the European Union. I mean, most ordinary people are not in a position to shift their assets or their fortune elsewhere, and they are not even able to see to it that suddenly members of their family can acquire the nationality of a European country. I mean, that is not available to ordinary people, and all of this is going to have an influence on their access to health care, and there are going to be all kinds of social implications and economic implications for ordinary people, and it's going to have an impact on the development of their regions as well. And so that is why, with these people in mind, that we should feel a debt towards ordinary people. I mean, not to the government, not to the House of Commons, but to ordinary people. And that is why we must extend a hand to them and make an offer to them. But there are two consequences we need to talk about if we are looking ahead and preparing for a disorderly exit on the 29th of March, Mad Friday. That's what is looming on the horizon. And in view of that, we've got to ring-fence citizens' rights. We've got to do something to make sure that the rights of citizens in the UK, as well as in the EU, are not jeopardised. That is our job. That is our duty. I mean, we have taken on this responsibility, and so we have made certain undertakings as a European Union, and it is high time that we say this loud and clear, and that we continue to stand side by side with the Republic of Ireland to support them, and say that we are firmly opposed to a hard border and indeed any change to the Good Friday Agreement in all its facets. The rights and security of people in this part of Europe cannot be put in jeopardy. But there's actually a very simple solution to this whole backstop problem, and that is that there be no border on the island of Ireland, that there be no controls. Irish unity would be the single most simple solution. UK wouldn't have a problem, Irish wouldn't have a problem, and Brexiteers wouldn't have a problem either. That would be a solution. It would be the solution, and the British government today has explained that there will be no controls between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and perhaps a smaller Great Britain is more important than the interests of certain political parties, and that is something that I think that we should take them at their word when they say that.
La parola ora al presidente del gruppo.
And now I call the President of the Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy, Nigel Farage.
Very much hoping, after nearly 20 years, that this is my penultimate speech in this Parliament, and that I won't be coming back here again in July. And I'm sure many of you here would share that sentiment. Mr Barnier, I told you that treaty wouldn't go through the House of Commons. You didn't believe me. It's been rejected. I think you pushed your luck too far. You asked for too much, and this morning you find yourself short of £39 billion, so I'm sure you're feeling a bit sore about that. But don't worry, help is at hand, because the House of Commons today will do, I'm sure, their utmost to betray the Brexit vote. They're even going to vote against what Article 50 said, which is, of course, that we leave on the 29th of March with or without a deal. And I have to say, I think the gap now between our political class in the UK and public opinion is a gaping chasm, because be in no doubt, Public opinion is hardening. There is a greater sense of unity in the country than I've seen for some years. We simply want to leave, and that applies to many who voted Remain as well, because they respect the very principle of democracy. And we've had enough. We've seen the snarling anger towards our country of Mr Verhofstadt, the bureaucratic intransigence of Mr Barnier, the constant stream of insults that come from Mr Tusk, and we're of one mind. We don't want to be governed by you. We want to govern ourselves. Now, I'm sure the next instalment of this will be the British Prime Minister next Thursday going to the European Summit in Brussels, another humiliating display where she begs for an extension to Article 50. Well, I've got a solution to all of this. What I heard you, Mr Barnier, this morning say that if this treaty, if this withdrawal agreement gets passed, the next phase of negotiations could last for up to 4 years. I thought, enough. We don't want to waste 4 more years of our life, 4 more years of agony, and you don't want to waste another 4 years. You've got your plan. You want a United States of Europe. You want your army. You want everyone to join the euro. You want to get rid of the nation states. We are just a damned nuisance. And add to that, as Mr Verhofstadt said, the European elections. You don't want me coming back here, or hordes of Eurosceptics coming back here. So there is a simple solution, and that is that the British request to extend is vetoed at that European summit. We leave on March the 29th. Most of the preparations have been done. Even if there are a few short-term bumps in the road, we leave, and both you and we can get on with the rest of our lives. That is the only neat solution ahead of us.
ENF Group, Mr Batten.
Now, Mrs May be totally incompetent, but she is following a plan. Right from the start, the plan was to delay Brexit, impede Brexit, and finally to overturn Brexit. The whole leaving process has been built on false arguments, the principal one being that we cannot leave without the mythical good deal. Now, the deal is appallingly bad, and it has been rejected by the Commons, not because it was bad, but because it wasn't bad enough for them. Later today, Parliament will reject leaving on the so-called no-deal option, and on Thursday, it is likely to vote in favour of an extension of Article 50. But what for? Mr Juncker has already told Her Majesty's government, like naughty schoolchildren, that there will be no third chance to renegotiate. In the UK, we have a government and a parliament that does not want to leave the European Union, and it intends to betray the democratic decision of the referendum. Now, Councillor Timmermans has expressed his exasperation with the UK in rejecting the EU's deal. Mr Timmermans said that only the UK Parliament can give direction in this matter. But this is not so. The Council and Commission can give direction. When the Common asks for an extension to Article 50, then you must reject it. Article 50 says that if no agreement is reached by the 29th of March, then the treaties automatically cease to apply. Do nothing and ensure that the UK is ejected from the European Union on the 29th of March. Do yourselves a favour, do us a favour, and kick us out.
Thank you, colleagues. This debate is running over on time, so I will have to be a little bit more strict with speakers. Mrs Dodds, I'm sure you will adhere to your 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Last night, MPs from all parties voted again to reject the withdrawal agreement. I regret that sufficient progress has not been made in this respect. The Attorney-General's advice is clear. The legal risk remains unchanged. Without evidence of Brussels' bad faith, the UK would have no internationally lawful means of exiting the backstop. My party has always been clear. We want an orderly exit from the EU. We want a Brexit deal that works for both the United Kingdom and the European Union, and indeed for our closest neighbours in the Republic of Ireland. But that agreement must respect the constitutional and economic integrity of Northern Ireland. Can I respond also to a couple of things that have been raised from the floor? There's been much talk of the rights of citizens, and I agree that citizens should not be a bargaining chip in this negotiation. The House of Commons has already said that we should move to protect the rights of citizens in all eventualities. That is a challenge for this House to take up and stop talking about it.
Thank you. Mr Lewandowski, for 2 minutes.
Pani prezydent, ja lubię brytyjskie seriale.
Thank you, Madam President. I know I like the British series, but this particular series, Brexit series, is absolutely endless, and that does upset us. I am ever more shocked to see the political chaos which is unfolding in the British Isles. And I have already said in this House that the opposition were trying to find good models here in Europe for our domestic political models in Europe. But the effectiveness, the efficiency of the British was a model for us, which is why we are even more disappointed today. There are little political squabbles going on between politicians, and that's what we're seeing. But I have to say today that I don't understand politicians who, on the one hand, don't want no deal, but on the other, don't want to accept the deal that was put forward. So the lack of certainty is getting worse and worse. It's getting worse for people, the British themselves, but also for Europeans living in Britain, such as the Poles. I don't really understand why an extension would help. How are we going to be able to solve this in a few months if we haven't managed in 2 years? What we have to do is fight against disinformation, because all of this is linked. The British referendum was based on misinformation, disinformation, and actually on lies coming from outside the UK, from Russia, for example. And I think that the next Commission and the next Council have to strengthen security. They have to fight against trolls, they have to fight against fake news, and they have to strengthen our military capacity and others as well. Thank you.
2 minutes, Mr Gualtieri.
Thank you, President. For the second time, the UK government has not been able to find a positive majority in the House of Commons. It has been a big mistake not to try to bring all the forces in the House together in the interest of the country. Instead, the UK government has decided to appease the Tories' hard Brexit, a strategy that backfired spectacularly last night. Mr Henkel, you are wrong. As Michel Barnier said, the EU has always been a fair, transparent and constructive partner in this negotiation. We have done all we can to guarantee an orderly withdrawal of the UK that protects citizens. Let me say that we have now a specific and particular responsibility to keep protecting all the European citizens in this process and to preserve the peace process in Northern Ireland. And we have also taken into account, of course, the UK government red lines. Let me repeat this. This is the only withdrawal treaty that is possible and the only that could command an approval in this House. So what next? First, we still trust the UK parliamentarians today to reject a no-deal Brexit that would be catastrophic for the UK. Second, we need a clear direction on how concretely to avoid the no-deal scenario. We always said that the closer EU-UK relationship based on a customs union would not only benefit our economies, but would solve many of the concerns associated with the backstop. It is time to stop party politics and to work constructively in the interest of the citizen and the country. And if this is not possible, it is clear that the only alternative is to give the people the chance to change the government or to say no to Brexit. This is the debate we need to have, not the debate on the length of the extension. On this, for us, it's clear that extension is a tool and all the options are on the table as far as they are a clear political reason and perspective. And we will keep working constructively, openly and responsibility, including toward the UK citizens that remain European citizens.
Colleagues, I am conscious this is a very difficult debate and colleagues want to make their points very clearly, but I am duty-bound to try and pull the time back a little because we have lengthy votes. So please, Mr Nicholson will not let me down. You have 1.5 minutes, sir.
Don't count on it, President. I have listened this morning, Madam President, with a heavy heart to what I have heard in this chamber. I have listened to nothing positive. In fact, that has all been negative. People are stuck in trenches and nothing constructive is coming forward. Mr Timmermans said, so here we are. Solutions must come from London. Do you not think, Mr Timmermans, that you and Mr Juncker have a part to play as well, that you have got to find a solution also? Mrs Zimmer let the cat out of the bag. You will not annex Northern Ireland. Irish unity is not at stake here. Even nationalist parties do not want a referendum on the border. They accept the Good Friday Agreement. Put that all to bed. And can I say to you, Mr Barnier, you said solely to UK is the responsibility. And I'll say to you, sir, you also have a tremendous responsibility. And it is not good enough for you to simply consult with people from Northern Ireland who tell you what you want to hear. There is another voice in Northern Ireland, and you should be listening to that as well. And I'm sorry to have to say to you, with the greatest respect, your treaty is flawed. It's damaged, and it's not going to work. We need to find another way. And we do need an extension on Article 50. Yes, we do need an extension to find that other way. And it's not good enough to be told we need to have a reason for an extension. We need an extension to move forward to get a good deal, because I and my party and the people that I represent, we want a good deal. And let me tell you, Mr Barnier, this morning the UK government announced that all goods flowing from the Republic of Ireland to Northern Ireland will come unhindered. Can you say the same?
Thank you, Jim. I'm afraid you failed the test on time. And Mrs Harkin, for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Prime Minister May profoundly regrets the defeat. I, like many of you, profoundly regret that the UK seems to have lost its way. Since 1973, we've had our differences with the UK, sometimes influenced by history, by different perceptions and by fake news. And we must also remember that what matters is the future. And we mustn't forget 1992 Denmark, 2001, 2008 Ireland, 2005 France and the Netherlands, when European citizens said no to certain EU proposals. Yet, as individual countries and a union, through listening, consultation and protocols, our citizens were able to find a way forward to work together. And despite what Mr Farage said, I believe that still can happen with the UK. I also profoundly disagree with him when he speaks about snarling anger and bureaucratic intransigence. As always, he seeks to shift responsibility for a divided country onto the shoulders of others. I agree with Michel Barnier. We have been and we need to remain patient, supportive and respectful while remaining true to our principles. And I thank him and his team for their loyal and dedicated work. And finally, I agree with Mr Gualtieri. An extension is just a tool to find a way forward, and all options still need to be explored.
Thank you. For 1 minute, Mrs Evans.
Mr President, we've witnessed another crushing defeat for the UK government in its second meaningful vote on a deal that would have been disastrous for Wales, taking us out of the single market and the customs union. It's clear that the UK Parliament cannot come to a meaningful conclusion, and so it's time to turn back to the people. The concentration of wealth in London has got us into this mess, and the concentration of power in Westminster is keeping us trapped in it now. Democracy is the way forward. We must give people a final say on their future now that we are seeing the real facts. Things have changed. When events change, people change their minds. That is their right. Wales, my constituency, has done that. 55% now back Remain, a 14% increase on 2016. We need an extension of Article 50, and we need that for a people's vote. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. For 1.5 minutes, Mrs Anderson.
People on the north of Ireland have had enough of this shambolic mess. Our clear will to remain in the EU has been ignored. The utter chaos in Westminster, not just last night, but throughout the entire Brexit process, has left communities in despair. This farce is Tory designed, but it's been delivered to the people of the north of Ireland via petition by the DUP. We consider the withdrawal agreement and its backstop to be the least worst option that the people can accept. That has been totally rejected again by the reckless political establishment in Britain. The European Union has committed to supporting the Good Friday Agreement in all of its parts. Well, that includes the legitimate democratic pathway to Irish unity, and despite what Jim Nicholson said, it is a provision of the Good Friday Agreement. The British Prime Minister herself believes that Brexit is increasing support for Irish unity. The European Council said in April 2017 that if Ireland is reunited, then the whole Ireland will remain as part of the EU. I remind the Council and the Commission of that. The EU said that we need to prepare for a no deal, for a crash. Who in their right mind would sit on a train that is going over a cliff or being dangerously delayed or derailed? So the people want off that train, and the only way off it is Irish unity. And my appeal to you is that you advocate for the holding of a referendum in Irish unity. It is legitimate, it is democratic, it is in the Good Friday Agreement. If you're going to uphold it in all of its parts, then uphold that part too.
I'm really sorry, but you should try and make your point within the time that's allocated. Mr Pedicini, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. I think it's time for us to speak up and say what the real reasons are for Brexit, because today we've heard many suggestions. We've had Macron, Juncker, a whole string of public utterances saying that it's all because of misinformation which confused the public will in the UK. But the British people have always been very lucid. When it came to the single currency, for example, when they didn't join up to Schengen or the fiscal compact, the British people have always reacted lucidly against austerity policies and budget links imposed by the Franco-German axis. What we need is a European policy which is not just colonisation by France and Britain by another name. We don't want to see simply more austerity. Otherwise, Brexit will be the shape of things to come, and that's the way Europe will be headed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs Atkinson, 1 minute.
I apologise to the British people for the lies told by our politicians. Mr Tajani, an Italian, tells a German newspaper that the British people did not want Brexit. In the 2017 general election, 80% of our people, the British people, voted for parties to deliver Brexit. They lied. Mrs May said no deal is better than a bad deal. She then asked Parliament to vote on a bad deal. Tonight she will ask Parliament to vote again, but this time for a no deal. She will vote against a no deal. Tonight a Conservative Prime Minister will cancel Brexit. Backed by Labour, they lied to you. This is Dino, democracy in name only. And as for Messrs Tusk, Barnier and the rest of you, and their useful idiot Varadkar, there's a special place in hell reserved for dinos, and Mrs May will be joining you too. So I call on the British Parliament, join me on the 29th of March in Parliament Square, and let's this time really take back control.
Well done, Janet.
Mr Wolfe, for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 2 days ago, doctors diagnosed my uncle with a terminal illness, and he will die this weekend. He spent his life in public service protecting children from abusers, paedophiles and violence. He was a great Welsh Democrat. He voted to leave in June 2014, and he will die not seeing Brexit. He will die not seeing Brexit because of a political class that despise him and voters in Britain, who believe that they are far superior in the way that they think they should control our lives and do not wish to listen to the voters who wanted to get rid of them. He will die because he will not get a Brexit before his death because of traitors like Tony Blair and Dominic Grieve, who collude with foreign leaders to stop the democratic vote of the British. My uncle, I hope, will have God on his side and bless his soul. But for those of you who have denied him the right to Brexit and denied those 17.4 million people Brexit, God will not be on your side when they unleash their anger in the ballot box. Thank you.
Mr Brok, 2 minutes. Herr Brok.
Herr Präsident.
President, Udo Bullmann, Mr Timmermans, colleagues, I think there is a coalition in the House of Commons that is not in a position to coalesce around a solid majority. You've got the Remainers who don't want any kind of agreement because, you know, they're playing hardball. And then you've got the Farages of this world who don't want any kind of a deal with the European Union. And then you've got people who look at this from a party political point of view. I mean, you've got 3 Labour members who voted yes. And so there is no majority for a constructive solution in the House of Commons, that being the case. Now, both the big political parties have now got to come together, talk to one another, and they have got to show where that constructive majority lies. And that will be worth talking about. And I think that an extension of the deadline will not be possible if we don't have that qualification, no extension without clarification of the words. I mean, I think we've got to have a very clear rule. I mean, if you just extend this and just, wait and see what happens, I don't think is right. And I think over the next couple of weeks, the House of Commons has got to come forward with a declaration, and we've got to move forward on that basis. Of course, we need that security because we've been negotiating over the last 2.5 years. Michel, thank you very much. Heartfelt thanks for all the work that you have done and that the Commission has done, that your team has done. But still, notwithstanding all of that hard work, I take the view that we've not got anything through the House of Commons because we've got, this negative majority for the reasons that I've gone into. So more was not possible. I mean, you couldn't deliver any more. And what is clear now is what is facing us with the open borders. I mean, the UK is not going to be able to slip into the single market without meeting the obligations of the single market, and everything that's been said today is populist, and we cannot countenance any kind of that slipping into the single market by the back door.
For 1.5 minutes, Madam Bresso.
Thank you very much, President, colleagues, Vice President, Mr. Barnier, Minister. Just a few days away from the European Council, there are still a lot of questions, but two of crucial importance for the future of the EU. Brexit, first of all, and yesterday's defeat for Theresa May, and now the extension of Article 50, which looks inevitable, I do not think should make us extend something too long. It's been going on since 2016. The ideas, everything have to go back to the British people now. We have to absolutely tackle the fundamental issue, allow the British people to speak again. Let's hear their voice. Let's see what direction they want to go in, because the House of Commons is clearly blocked. They do not know what they want. They have no idea, and the only way out of this is to give the British people the chance to vote again and to hear from them. I think a lot of our colleagues, certainly those who are Brexiters, are scared of giving the choice back to the British people. Now, a second question, which is certainly more important for the future of the European Union, is the issue of climate change. We are going to be adopting some very important measures, but I think that we also have to look at how our rules of procedure work, that we have to intervene with the European semester, make sure that that is based on the environmental rules for sustainability, no longer on austerity, but on the SDGs of the United Nations. Thank you. I do apologize.
And 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning. The new financial yesterday was saying that 250 companies in the banking and financial sector have left or are going to leave the UK. 5,000 jobs, 1,000 billion UK sterling are going to leave, and that's only the numbers that we know already. But there's a big amount of unknowns there as well, so that's a very bad thing with these companies leaving. But we are going to suffer as well, for example, in fisheries or in the transport sector. At the same time that we can see that in the Parliament in London, there is not a majority for any of the options. And that means that we need a new approach. We've got to have a rethink. The UK have got to stay in the European Union. What we need is a new deal, not a no deal. And we've got to make the UK an offer they cannot refuse. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flanagan, 1 minute.
Chair, I hear the word solidarity used over and over again. Solidarity can come in many forms, political, but also financial. Commissioner Timmermans, you talked about continuing preparation for a new deal, continuing on the solid work already done. So, what are the plans in place to financially help the Irish economy in the case of a no deal? And I really would like an answer. Solidarity up until now has cost the European Union not a single cent. Also, while people talk about solidarity, in parallel we have a situation whereby Ireland borrowed and burnt €3.5 billion last year on the orders of the ECB. As part of the financial help needed in the case of a no deal, this obscenity must end. Monsieur Barnier, you said we remain respectful, we remain calm. You do indeed. People in Ireland cannot control the diplomatic disaster that the Conservative Party is. However, when it comes to respect and calmness, I am glad that Tusk and Juncker are not here today, because they have not remained calm and have at times put their own personal prejudice before diplomacy. You must think of this, and with every word that is used, remember that.
For 1 minute, Mr. Monod.
Thank you, President. Mr. Timmermans, the European Council on the 21st of March is going to give the European Commission the mandate that they want to negotiate a free trade agreement with the US. Now, Germany is rather worried to see the US impose 25% customs duties on car exports from May. So what is this? So the adoption of 0% tariffs on industrial products, which will allow Germany to carry on its trade surplus with the United States, but it'll be a problem for other countries, in particular France. And we are also looking at new common standards for new technologies. The US then are going to impose their conditions on us, and then it'll be a lowering of barriers for farm. That's what the US want, and the Germany will give their instructions to the Commission, who will give in, because farmers in France are not nearly as important, of course, as BMW and others. And as usual, this will be to the detriment of European citizens who will only wake up too late. Thank you.
Wilimski for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam President.
Ευχαριστώ, κυρίες και κύριοι. Όποιος χθες παρακολούθησε τη συζήτηση στην Βρετανική Βουλή των Κοινοτήτων και είδε με πόσο άθλιο τρόπο είναι διχασμένη η Βρετανική πολιτική τάξη, δεν μπορεί παρά να είναι σοκαρισμένος. Σοκαρισμένος γιατί υπάρχει...
Sorry to interrupt your speech.
Thank you.
If you speak again, we will make sure that it's coming through. Please.
Start again.
Well.
Okay, I'll start again.
Ladies and gentlemen, anybody who followed the debate in the House of Commons yesterday and saw a spectacle of British politics can only have been shocked. Shocked because there was a clear majority amongst the British people to leave the European Union. So it really is neither here nor there. What you think, if you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, you know, and nobody cares what I think either. What is at stake is respect for democracy and for majority decision-making, for people who have given a clear direction. So I can only appeal to all of you to, you know, stop messing about, you know, with this idea of trying to bring about a second referendum via the back door. I mean, if you had a second referendum, you know, it wouldn't change anything. You know, how is this game going to end? Are you going to find a shift in opinion? I mean, then you have a third referendum. No, I mean, we've got to take ourselves seriously. And if we want to reform the European Union, and then we've got to play by the rules of the game, and we've got to be fair.
Mr. Synodinos, for 1 minute, please.
Thank you. The withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the Union is not just a procedural matter. It means that any federalization and new European Union you want to design will be rejected in the next European elections. The healthy patriotic forces will increase their influence and they will try to renationalize competencies. The effort to scare the other member states because of the way you treat the European Union will not succeed. Those who have the power do not want to have voluntary cooperation between sovereign member states, but they will be rejected and they will have to respect national sovereignty and nation states. Serious people should take over power on the basis of a broad coalition and the cooperation of patriotic forces in all European countries for a European Union that will be based on nation states and not on economic interests. Thank you.
2 minutes, Madam del Castillo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, President. Council, Commission, Michel Barnier, all these people have done a great job. The agreement struck on Monday night by Ms May, Prime Minister, for the EU was an opportunity. It was the opportunity to have an orderly withdrawal with enough guarantees regarding concerns that the UK had being stuck in the customs union. But despite all of that, it was turned down by the UK Parliament. It was yet another disillusionment because of a lack of responsibility and realism on the behalf of the majority of UK MPs that are constantly holding up a true solution. It's quite probably that in the UK Parliament they'll vote against an agreement, and tomorrow they will vote in favour of extending Article 50. But one thing is not going to change, which is the terms of the withdrawal agreement on behalf of the EU. So the UK will have to decide agreement or no agreement, deal or no deal. That's the issue. And against the backdrop of this uncertainty, there are a number of elections that Brexit, decisions that Brexit is making, and it is to do with deep-reaching economic changes to the country, and there are huge decisions like this that can't be taken lightly at all. The second is that withdrawing means having a direct impact on the daily life of people in small but very important things in people's daily life. Access to cheaper and more varied products, being able to travel without having to pay extra roaming charges, the same for pharmaceutical costs, and all of this because of what's happening in the UK, the customs impact of all this. So at the moment, the EU is more necessary than ever in order to meet the global challenges that we have. And if you don't act together, then you run the risk of becoming irrelevant. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to break some bad news to people who will be very angry with me, but I have no choice. We will have to drop Catch the Eye because we are really exceeding our time. So apologies that that is the case. Now, Madam Van Bremt, you have the floor for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. Sometimes there are Strasbourg weeks where hope and disillusionment are very close together, and this is one of these weeks. This is one such week. Everyone's spoken about yesterday's vote and what this means and what this will lead to. And I agree with a lot of colleagues from my own group that it's now time to let the people speak again. The British Parliament obviously sees no way out, so I think we need to go back to the people to break the deadlock. And there was also a great deal of hope, and I'll tell you why. There were 60 young persons who came to Parliament and have tried to convince the entire Parliament to put climate policy at the top of the political agenda. And it's not just because the level of ambition for 2030 is too low, but should be implemented, but also to increase that level of ambition. If we want to meet the commitments under the Paris Agreement, then by 2050 we need to be completely carbon neutral, and we certainly need higher objectives for 2030. So we need a climate law at EU level so that the Paris Agreement is enshrined into law, and so that all member states have commitments to meet, and so that there can't be any free riders. And the young persons of today are right in calling for this type of action from us. So, Madam President, that was the sign of hope that we've had this week, and the only sign of hope.
Mr. Sulik, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Yesterday's chaos in the British House of Commons showed that the withdrawal agreement is dead. We can't and won't vote on it forever. We need to wipe the slate clean because we're back at the beginning. We're just out of time. The UK's decision to leave the EU has to be respected, however. Ignoring the will of the people would be just wrong. Having a second referendum or all kinds of demands, those are unrealistic. So the only logical solution is preparing for a hard Brexit, for a no deal. That doesn't have to be the end of the world for the UK or for the EU. If we approach the situation with a clear head, World Trade Organization rules will apply. If our British colleagues, and when our British colleagues ask for an extension tomorrow, then we can do that without major difficulty And in that period of time, we can take some fundamental steps, take measures to get to a hard Brexit. Thank you.
Mr. Bay, 1 minute.
Le changement climatique sera de nouveau au menu du prochain Conseil européen.
Climate change is going to be on the agenda of the Council once again, 21st and 22nd of March. And that's yet again going to be when the EU is going to be talking about saving the planet, encouraging free trade, unrivaled free trade with the whole of the planet, but pushing up these climate harming gas emissions, and this is something where this is harming our industry. Now, all we're doing is importing products from countries that don't have the same environmental standards or the same health and social standards, and this is all coming through on super tankers which kick out fine particles, nitrogen oxide and so on. So this is terrible on all fronts. It's time to rethink our economic model, look at protection, relocalisation, produce and recycle within a reasonable geographic extent, and that's the only way that we can reconcile the economy with the environment.
Madam Hübner, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, the rejection of the withdrawal agreement means several crucial things. First, that an orderly withdrawal in 2 weeks is not going to happen. And secondly, that the Union's and indeed UK's priorities of protecting citizens and businesses most affected by the withdrawal and of avoiding a hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland and safeguarding the Good Friday Agreement have not been delivered a mere 2 weeks before March 29. They are indeed under serious risks, and that is very bad. If the result of the possible vote tomorrow is to request an extension, then what for and for how long? Short technical extension would only make sense with a positive, meaningful vote, which is not the case anymore. Longer extension would not only bring the legal and political problem in the context of European elections, it will also provide for a period when future partnership cannot be negotiated. Withdrawal agreement will not be reopened. Longer extension means a longer period of uncertainty. The Union has said many times how important is orderly withdrawal on the basis of an agreement of concluded under Article 50 of the treaty. This is indeed a precondition for creating trust necessary for the negotiations of a deep and ambitious new relationship, and we have to repeat it today. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Fajon, 1.5 minutes.
Spoštovana predsedujoča, evropski voditelji bodo
Thank you very much. Chair, the heads of state and government will talk about the economy, and there's a long tradition of doing that, but that's not going to be enough. It's high time to link up the economy with the environment and link jobs to where environment is disappearing. That's what the youth are telling us. The UK's vote, we can only hope that there's not going to be a hard Brexit. Colleagues, this is going to be the last summit before the European elections, and so the pressure is even greater. Our citizens expect action from us, but I think that opportunity is going to be lost once again. So look at the failed migration policy. We've looked at an efficient migration package here in the Parliament and secure borders. We've done that, but the problem is with nationalist politicians and national governments, and we need to point the finger at them. The heads of state and government who are blocking migration policy, well, we know who they are, and they're using populist reasons for that, and they're holding the rest of the EU hostage. And these are leaders who are ignoring the concerns of our citizens, because migration has been a major concern of EU citizens for 5 years. So they're hoodwinking their electorate, and the electorate might take revenge here. We need a socially just Europe. We know that populism is dangerous. Nationalism is not a European value. We need a different future. Thank you.
For 1 minute, Madam Tomašić.
gospođo predsjedavajuća.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Brexit has turned into a complete chaos because neither side has acted in good faith, nor have they wanted to truly deliver what people had voted for. Brussels saw it as a chance to send a message to the rest of us that there can be no stability and no prosperity outside the EU, while London's wishes were mostly articulated by those politicians who personally voted Remain, and they tried to achieve the impossible, to take the UK out, but in practice to keep it in. So this complicated political situation in the UK and in the rest of Europe has aggravated the situation additionally, and we will probably now witness a competition in finger-pointing and looking for a culprit, but both sides are responsible. It's no use crying over spilt milk. We should now prepare for the future in which we will, I believe, cooperate and trade without barriers to the benefit of both sides. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just one short remark on Brexit. So-called bad deal was not just negotiated by Mr. Barnier on behalf of the Commission, but also by the team of Prime Minister of UK and UK government. The problem, in my opinion, is not the deal. It is a political crisis that is taking place in London, and that was actually supported by activity of many people that already spoke here today and actually disappeared as usual. But let me talk about some other business in the summit. I guess it's very important to focus on economy. After good times, maybe not so good times will come. It could be triggered by the trade war, it could be triggered by the Brexit or by other events, and it's up to member states really to consider how robust are our economies and how ready are they for worse economic environment, slowdown of the economic growth and possibly other implications. The second important thing for me is China. I guess that our representatives should be more assertive. They should more clearly articulate our legitimate interest and negotiate accordingly. Just yesterday we talked about cyber security. We should know what Chinese law on national security means. And obviously there are huge topics like fair trade, like the climate changes and involvement in China in solving this issue, and also human rights. And I guess we should pay attention to these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weidenholzer for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you.
What is currently happening in the UK is tragic. This is a nation which is quite rightly very proud of its own history, and the EU owes it a great deal, and unfortunately now it's being held up to ridicule. They don't really have a government in place, and without any political steer, the UK is heading for difficult times. This makes us angry and very sad at the same time. An entire generation will bear the brunt of these decisions. This is a historical moment, and we can't afford to make any more errors. I think that the UK and the Brits need to be pragmatic, and we need to give them a last opportunity. Otherwise, we're just being self-righteous. But of course, there needs to be a request from London. And I think that the UK remaining in the EU is the best solution. But it needs to be legitimised through a referendum. And unlike the previous referendum, this would have to be a referendum with a binding nature. We need to do everything in our power to have clarity for the 3 million citizens who live in the UK and the Brits who live in the EU. There's a great deal of unclarity, there's not enough being done, and these people deserve more respect. They've based their life decisions on a different basis and can now not be bearing the brunt for all of this.
Thank you. Mr. Marias, 1 minute.
The dramatic developments about Brexit are a serious shock for the European continent. We must all understand that Brexit sent a strong message. The European peoples are seeking another way for Europe, a Europe of homelands and nations, respecting national traditions and peoples, a democratic and decentralized Europe, a Europe of solidarity and not of a hard core, a social Europe, not a Europe for the banks. The European peoples cannot cope with any more austerity and violent budgetary fiscal adjustments that have been imposed by the Eurogroup and the Central Bank. And soon, in the forthcoming European elections, they will send a strong message, because there is a different way for Europe, getting back the national sovereignty of the nation states, refusing Chinese-level wages, a way against German Europe.
Mrs. Girling, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Last night, we saw another manifestation of the inability of the British Parliament to reach a consensus. A reduced majority, but still the fourth most devastating defeat for a UK government in history. Last night, Theresa May set out 3 options. Firstly, revoke Article 50, possibly the first time those words have passed her lips in public. Secondly, she talked about holding a second referendum, ditto, and don't underestimate the significance of her saying those words. And thirdly, negotiate a new deal. I think the message, though, has finally got through in Westminster that the third option is not possible in any sensible time frame. So now it's down to no deal or no Brexit. It seems very likely that tonight the UK Parliament will reject no deal. They will not reject no Brexit. Of course, we've got a limited direct role here. We have to choose our language carefully. We're giving signals. So let me assure colleagues here that there is a strong will in the UK for a second vote. The People's Vote campaign is the biggest grassroots pro-EU European movement. Polls show a majority in favour of a second referendum. Like all things Brexit, it won't be easy, but don't believe the voices you've heard from the Brits here today. 7 out of 9 speakers today represent only 1.5% of the seats in the House of Commons. They're spouting their usual rot and nonsense. They are not the patriots. They are the ones advocating a no-deal Brexit. That's an act of unparalleled harm to the British people and the European Union. They are not the patriots. Nobody calling themselves a patriot would advocate for that kind of harm. No one laying claim to the title unionist would advocate for a no Brexit deal. No one who wants to support the Good Friday Agreement would advocate for a no-deal Brexit. They are not in the majority. Actually, they're all in the bar, coalescing around a beer now. They don't even bother to stay and listen. So I say to you, you are not today's people. You are yesterday's voices. We are the voices of today, and young people support my position completely. So, colleagues.
Mrs. Girling. Mr. Corbett, 2 minutes.
After the first rejection of the deal by the House of Commons back in January, Theresa May tried to renegotiate just one point, the Irish backstop, in order to appease the right wing of her party. But for a majority in the House of Commons, that was not the main problem with her deal. There were other problems, and she made no attempts to address those issues. She only tried to appease the right wing of her party, and she failed. So where does that leave us? A majority in the House of Commons does not want to leave without a deal, but the only deal on the table has been rejected. Where do you go from there? Logically, there are only 2 possibilities. Either you negotiate an alternative deal, or you reconsider Brexit. An alternative deal, the chances of that look vanishingly small at the moment. Reconsidering Brexit needs a referendum. And as we just heard from Mrs. Girling,
there is a majority in public opinion that wants another referendum, and opinion polls show that if there were another referendum, the British people would vote to remain in the European Union. It's absolute folly to proceed with Brexit on the ground that it is the will of the people, when it may very well no longer be the will of the people. It's at least worth checking. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Karas, 1.5 minutes.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, it's clear today, and it's clear for all of us, if there is no major change in the United Kingdom, then the 29th of March will bring with it a chaotic, hard Brexit. And we also need to be clear who is not ready to go into cross-party talks. And if you're not ready to do that, then you can't reach a solution for the future. The economic, the environmental, the social, the technological, the democratical, the political challenges we have are such that we can only solve them by cross-party cooperation in Europe, through European unity. That's what the European Parliament elections are about. That's what's at stake for the composition of the next Commission. And this is the reality. And this reality is in stark contrast to the failure of politics and those who bear political responsibility in the United Kingdom, but also other political parties not in government in the UK and in other European countries. Let's look at the murder of journalists in Malta and Slovakia, the blocked infringement procedures against Poland and Hungary, the rise of populism and nationalism in Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic and Romania. The European ideal is being hollowed out from the inside. The danger comes from within, and we need to tackle that at the European elections. Pointing the finger, lies, anti-Semitism, nationalism will solve nothing. It will solve no problems in Europe. It won't solve Brexit. It's only a new form of consensus that will get us anywhere.
Mr. Kelly, for 1.5 minutes.
Following the rejection of the withdrawal agreement in the House of Commons last night, there is a grave sense of trepidation in Ireland, especially among the farming community and the agri-food sector, because they know that a crash out, a hard border, reverting to WTO rules will send them to the wall. They'll go out of business. So, also, we all know that if there is a crash out, that the hard-won peace which we've enjoyed for the last 20 years is also in mortal danger. Therefore, I hope that today in the House of Commons they will vote to avoid a no deal, a crash out. And if they do, I think we should immediately offer an extension, not be putting conditions on it. We should offer it, because we can do so for 3 months without interfering in any way with our elections. And as my colleague Jim Nicholson said, this will help them to find another way, and maybe that way might be to stay. Now, wouldn't that be a countenance devoutly to be wished? Wouldn't any extension be worth that? So I'm appealing to the European Commission to act in good faith by saying, yes, we're going to help you. We're going to give you the time and the space to get your own house in order, to avoid a hard Brexit, to avoid a crash out. If you're serious about it, we give you the time and the space. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Šuica, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is obvious that the discussion about the preparation for the European Council has turned into a discussion about Brexit. We are not talking about the Paris Agreement, the green technologies. We are not talking about the European industry and the economy, unemployment, disinformation which comes from all sides. Unfortunately, this discussion is a discussion about about Brexit. Of course, Brexit is one of the most important topics. I would be pleased if Westminster paid more attention to the European Parliament and what we are talking about. We expect from them a responsibility. My personal opinion is with those who spoke about the second referendum. I think there is still space for a second referendum for the United Kingdom to stay in the European Union, because I think its place is in the European Union, and I am very sorry that the populists have won in the referendum. I believe that this can still be changed. I believe that the British politicians will be responsible enough to realize what the situation is and not jeopardize the future of young people who want to stay in the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes our speakers list. Vice President Timmermans, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Having listened very carefully to this Parliament, I come to the conclusion that there is very, very broad support in this Parliament for the way the Commission is negotiating on behalf of the European Union, its Member States and this Parliament to try and reach an agreement with the United Kingdom on a withdrawal that would do as little harm as possible to both sides. This has been the intention of the Commission from the start. This has been the way Michel Barnier has been negotiating from the start, and we feel strengthened in our approach by the debate here today. Having listened to Mr Farage and his colleagues, and seeing the hubris with which he stands here and the self-gratification of his position, I sometimes wonder, has he gone to Sunderland and talked to the workers at the Nissan plant and said to them, it might cost you your job, but I will get my pipe dream of so-called sovereignty. But it might cost you your job, sorry, but I'll get my pipe dream of so-called sovereignty. Has he done that? Has he gone to Oxford, to the mini plant, and said, I know what BMW are thinking if there's a no-deal Brexit, but I want it so badly, this no-deal Brexit, that I really don't care about your job. Has he done that? That would have been the honest thing to do, I suppose. Has Dr. Liam Fox ever said, well, I said it would be the easiest trade deal in human history, but on second thought it's much more complicated than I promised before the referendum? Has Boris Johnson gone to the doctors and nurses of the NHS and said, I did promise you 350 million extra pounds a week, but sorry, I can't deliver on that promise? Have they done that? I think, frankly, that we would need, if we want to come out of this situation, a bit more modesty and honesty on all sides. I also believe I just refer to a report by the UK government published in November last year, where it said that if there's a no-deal Brexit, this would cost approximately 9.3% economic growth. Are you willing to pay that price? I ask the Brexiteers on this side. Are you willing to pay that price? Are you willing to sacrifice all those jobs for your pipe dream of so-called sovereignty? What is that sovereignty going to bring to you if you live that pipe dream?
Freedom is essential.
Mr Coburn, excuse me, Vice President Timmermans, please.
Yes, I will.
Can I just say, Mr Coburn, you and I have a special relationship. I'm special and I don't know what you are, so please don't interrupt. And I know Mrs Atkinson takes issue with me on occasion. Please listen with respect. You may disagree, but I would urge you to listen and maybe learn.
But I did. Madam President, I did listen to Mr Coburn, and he says, liberty is more important, then have the courage and go to Sunderland and talk to the workers in the Nissan plant, talk to the workers in Oxford in the mini plant and tell them my so-called liberty is more important than your jobs. I have the courage to do that, sir. And then also go to Ireland and go to a place where since 1998 peace reigns and violence has disappeared, and tell the people there my pipe dream is more important than your peace and quiet. My pipe dream is more important, and I will accept a hard border if that gives me my no-deal Brexit. Have that courage. And I always hear one... Do you understand, do you know the number 16.1 million? I never hear it mentioned. I always hear 17.4 million. Yes, but 16.1 million are also British citizens who voted to stay. They haven't disappeared. Isn't the essence of European democracy that we also respect the position of minorities in our countries? Isn't the essence of democracy that we try to build bridges and to find solutions that can be carried by most people in our society? Should that not be the next steps we take in this? And to be very clear, why does the Commission stand so firm for the integrity of the internal market? Why don't we simply say, let's have open borders? I give you one example. If for some reason the United Kingdom would decide to have a trade deal with the United States on their terms, and chlorinated chicken would be coming into the United Kingdom, and we would not be able to check that at a European border, then we would not be able to say to European citizens, we can't protect you against something you don't want. We could never do that. That's why we have always to protect the integrity of the internal market. And we've been bending over backwards, and we spared no effort, and I do pay tribute to Michel Barnier, we spared no effort to try and reconcile Madam May's red lines and her demands with our firm duty to protect the European Union and the integrity of the internal market. The withdrawal agreement is the best and only possible solution to that dilemma, and I hope this is something that will be well understood. This is a position the Commission defends on your behalf. The vast majority of this Parliament supports this, and we will continue to do that to protect the interests of European citizens, whether they live on the continent or in the United Kingdom. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you, Vice President Timmermans. Madam Chiot for the Council.
Madam President, honourable members, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your remarks and comments. I will inform the President of the European Council accordingly. It is clear that Brexit is a pressing issue for leaders next week. Beyond dealing with these immediate concerns, it will be important to also address those strategic challenges that will define our common future in the years ahead. In that spirit, the different topics on the leaders' table will help feed this reflection for our next strategic agenda. The next rendezvous will be the informal summit in Sibiu, which will be a key moment to discuss and start shaping that long-term agenda. Thank you once again for your attention.
Thank you, Madam Chiot. The debate is now closed.